the city of Portland, I think they actually applied and got a grant to have a group from New York City called Common Ground come out. And what they were trying to do is identify Portland's most vulnerable homeless people. And it's all based on this doctor's work in Boston, Massachusetts. And it's kind of like a standardized survey form. And they've done it so far in all 5 boroughs of New York, New Orleans, LA's Skid Row,
DC.
Washington, D.C., and there's one other biggie, isn't there?
Chicago.
Boston.
Boston, yeah, for
Boston,
sure.
New York.
So, pretty standardized. We had to go out there really early in the morning because the idea is we wanted to eliminate anybody who's not truly homeless, like sleeping on the street. So we didn't want to go out late, because maybe people haven't gone home or wherever they crash and couch surf. So we were out there 6 to 8 in the morning, which is a little bit later than they actually did it in other cities, but we pushed for that here because, frankly, Portland is a sleepier city. And that wasn't just me that argued for that either. That was based on the homeless folks. And I just knew we wouldn't be able to wake them up. So we went out from 6 to 8 over the course of 3 days. We had like a whole bunch of service providers on board. And like 70 volunteers came on and got like a crash course in like street outreach on how to, be respectful and that kind of thing. And the survey, it sounded really intrusive, and I was really resistant to it at first. They wanted us to like ask for really deeply personal questions and ask to take their photograph. Things that sound like they're like, like etiquette 101 on the streets is like you don't ask to take someone's photo. That's just in poor taste, and we're waking people up. That's another thing we don't normally do on outreach. You just leave sleeping people there. But I kind of sucked it up because I talked to the woman who did it in New York, and she convinced me that, trust me, like if you do it, the results we get, the data that we collect will go to the funders and it'll actually help, and we'll identify our most vulnerable homeless people. So we did it, and it was pretty amazing. Very few people didn't let their photo be taken, which surprised me, frankly. And I've been doing this for a while. Now that I think I'm a know-it-all, but everybody was like, sure, you guys can take my photo. And we were only using the photo if we had to go back and find the person. So if we collected our data and we found out that, Dennis is a candidate for trimorbidity, that means I've got a mental health issue, a drug and alcohol issue, and a medical condition all co-occurring. I'm more, the study's showing that I'm more likely to die within 6 years on the street. They can actually show an outreach worker my photo and they'll come and find me. That was the theory behind the photos. So the interesting findings that came of this, and this kind of shocked the woman who organized the whole thing, was that our numbers Portland had more vulnerable homeless people than all the other places that they did the survey. And remember, that's New York City, New Orleans, LA, Skid Row. Oh, Sacramento, that was the other one that they did it in. What's that? I know, that's the big question. Hi, how are you? Good to see you in ages. Yeah, well, that's part of the ongoing dialogue that came of it. The other, there was a lot of just amazing, disturbing, but it's good that we got it kind of data. It's not good news, but it's like, wow, I did not know that. One of them was, we were I wasn't prepared to talk about it, so I hope I'm not wrong, but I think it's 10% higher in homeless people identifying that they've been violently attacked while they're on the streets. And that's higher than, again, New York, Los Angeles, these cities that we always typically think are way more aggressive.
I was going to add also foster care. We had 29% experience foster care, whereas 10% for all the other cities.
Yeah, Portland ranked off the charts for foster care involvement, which points to system failures that those of us who've worked with youth for a long time, we knew that, but it's always great to have the numbers to back it. 29% of the homeless people we interviewed said that they had foster care in their history. The other interesting one was we had a really high rate. Our rate for exposure-related health risks, and that includes hypothermia, frostbite, immersion foot, trench foot. Our numbers were dangerously close to New York City's numbers, and yet our winters are relatively mild, and we get homeless people who come here because the weather's mild. And that's indicative of a few things. I mean, Portland's a wet city, so that kind of makes sense, but it also kind of indicates that there's mental health issues there. That we've got people who aren't able to take care of themselves. So we've got like people walking barefoot in the rainy Portland winter, and they're getting, you know, hypothermia, trench foot, those kinds of things. What were there any other big ones that I...
Dual
What's the
diagnosis was really high in
Yeah.
Portland too.
Dual diagnosis, yeah, and you guys know dual diagnosis is it's co-occurring mental health issue and drug and alcohol issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks. Did you do it?
Mhm.
What's your name?
Corinne, I work for Cascade AIDS Project.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Katie's?
It was like 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
We met. But
Yeah, we had to be at City Hall, just to
Really?
clarify, we had to be at City Hall between 5 and 5:30, and we were dispatched on the streets at like, what, 5:45?
Ooh.
Yeah, it was rough.
How long ago was that?
It was last 2 months ago.
Okay, it was just.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
that
I have copies in my office of the actual like finished report that goes into like the national database, and now they can compare Portland to other cities. But for time's sake, I only was told I'd get 15 minutes, and so I didn't think I'd have time. But if you email me, I'll email it to somebody.
If folks get on our email list, we usually send resources out, so we'll get a hold of Dennis and
Cool.
send it out over our email list. You can sign up on that back table with your email.
And we'll also post a link directly to
So
the site.
I gotta go in a minute, but I brought some of these harm reduction manuals. It's like the basic, you know, like 101, kind of what are the basic tenets of harm reduction in case you forget everything I said. Or if I forgot to say what I should have said and I just babbled. And this is another form of harm reduction. I'll just leave it at the store, I guess, and you guys can, you know, if you
There's a
want
table
to see
back
it.
there.
Getting off right, this is like, you know, something that we would share with a needle user. It's going to be non-judgmental ways to reduce the harm of, you know, using drugs intravenously, regardless of what we think people should be doing with their drugs or their bodies. This is an example of a bleach kit. I'll leave one here. I don't need it. So you guys can look at it. If you know somebody who needs it, take it and give it to them. It's got all the needle exchange information in there, and it's got everything you need to clean a rig with bleach. And again, keep in mind, you know, when we think of the spectrum, the safest thing to do is to not do drugs. And if you're doing drugs, don't shoot them. If you're shooting them, use a clean needle every time. Don't share ever. If you're sharing needles with people, and we're going on and on down the spectrum. So we'd use this for somebody who's really pretty far down the spectrum, right? Just to clarify that again. And here's some more information that we would give to needle users. We usually put them in our bleach kits, but this is like the 101 on abscess infections. I'll just leave this stuff here. This is good stuff. It shows people how to use safer. There's a lot of mythology on the streets about like, hey, I got this spider bite, you know, and it doesn't look like a spider bite, it looks like an abscess. Did you know abscesses can turn into blood poisoning and you can die, you know. It's got outside in information on the back. So this is kind of an example of harm reduction, just talking to people kind of realistically, clear-eyed, non-judgmentally, but just really addressing the issue that they're facing. And last thing is Portland Bad Dateline. Do you all know about Portland Bad Dateline? Some people do. So this is a great example of harm reduction in action. This is it's not a hotline. You'd want to contact Portland Women's Crisis Line to talk to a human. But this is a voicemail, basically, set up by and for sex workers. And a bad date, you know, by this definition would be if you're a sex worker and the deal goes down wrong. And that can mean any number of things, from you agreed to a price and they ripped you off, to, you know, you got forced, you know, to have sex and got thrown out of a moving vehicle. I mean, and these are just as a cautionary, this is like rough ride reading, so this is pretty brutal stuff. And if you don't want to read it, I don't, because it's rough stuff, and a lot of it's happening in our neighborhood. You know, this stuff cuts across socioeconomic backgrounds. It cuts across, you know, any division that we think we've got. This stuff's happening in our neighborhoods, and it's brutal reading. But the way that it's harm reduction is that if these things happen to you, you call this hotline, you give an MO of the guy or the person, their vehicle, if they had like a line that they use, because these guys, a lot of these folks are, you know, serial offenders, and they use the same pickup line, or they use the same, you know, they have the same tick. They always smoke 2 cigarettes and then, you know, lose their, and all that's described here. And then Yellow Brick Road and other agencies in the area will distribute these to places we think there might be folks at risk of meeting these people. Again, it's harm reduction.